Hey, let's talk about fear and anxiety. I don't know if that's something that you deal with, but I know that it's something that I struggle with. It's been something that I've toyed around with and tried to gain control over for years, for a long time. And in reflecting upon it, I realized some things about fear and anxiety for me, and maybe these are things that may be true with you as well. We'll find out. Um, I found that often what happens is the things that I become fearful of, or the things that spark anxiety in me, there are things that probably never come to fruition, never actually happen. When I look back on it, look back on my past, the things that have had me the most troubled or the most worried never even materialized, never even took place. And what I found is for myself, the feeling of fear and anxiety, it's it's almost like it fuels itself. It's almost like it acts as rocket fuel to propel itself even further out of control. And so what I mean by that is I'll give you an example. So a lot of times with me, like I'll become fearful or I'll have anxiety around a certain situation. And so an example would be like at work, I have to give a presentation, right? And so I'll start to have all this fear and anxiety about presenting in front of a large crowd or being in front of a bunch of people. And what'll happen, here's the rocket fuel part that I'm talking about. That fear will grow and get bigger because other little fears from outside will start to attach themselves to it, and it'll gain momentum and gain momentum. So what I mean by that is what started out as a fear of presenting in front of a large group grew into this: how will I be received by my peers? What if I don't do well? How is that going to jeopardize my career or my career path going forward? Um, you see what I'm saying? Like what started out as one fear now has bloomed into two or three or four different things that have all attached themselves to the singular source. And so one thing that I've been trying to do, and I've been pretty effective with this has worked pretty well for me and it might work well for you, is when I see this happening, and this is the hardest part, is to be conscious, right? To really be conscious of what's going on and what you're feeling, and not just feel it, because that's what we all do, but recognize exactly what it is you're feeling. That takes a lot of conscious awareness to step almost outside of what you're experiencing and what you're feeling and being able to look at it objectively. So, but I've gotten pretty good at doing this, and you can too if you try. I guarantee you can. So what I've done now and what I continue to do is when these kind of things pop up, almost step aside from it, acknowledge that it's worthy of fear and anxiety. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be feeling it. But what I do is I take a minute to really look at what it is that I'm afraid of. So with regard to the example I gave you with presenting in front of a large group, what is it exactly about that makes me feel anxiety? And if I can focus my mind on focusing on what is the singular effect of it, what sparked it, what is really at the base of it, I keep my mind busy enough that these other outside worries that I mentioned don't have a chance to spiral in and start to affect me. And what's really good about this is that once you identify what it is exactly about that scenario that's making you feel anxiety, and who knows what your situation may be, everybody's going to be different, but if you can step aside and really say, okay, I'm afraid of this and why exactly. Once you do that, here's the second thing that I do that may help you, and this really helps deal with that anxiety, is I'll look at what I'm good at already that I know I'm good at that could be related to that, to offset it. So with regard to the speaking in front of a group, right? Presenting in front of a group, I have anxiety about getting in front of the whole group and being judged by my peers, potentially ridiculed, right? But how I buffer that is by affirming with myself that I know that I'm when it comes to writing, I'm good. I'm really good. So I know the material that I'm going to be presenting is solid. It's good. So that takes a little bit of the edge off. That takes the anxiety down quite a bit because I know that that aspect I thrive at. This other aspect, maybe I'm not so good at, but it's buffered now because I know that this other piece that went into it, the writing of the material, is solid. It's good. So the advice that I have for you, if you deal with fear and anxiety and things like that, is first of all, don't let them bloom out of control, because what could start out as one thing that you're fearful of, if you're not careful, could turn into 5 different things that have now attached themselves to that one thing. Be careful not to let that happen, because that's a runaway train. That's pretty hard to get out of that hamster wheel. And then when you're really feeling that feeling of anxiety, take a minute to, first of all, try to be conscious of it and recognize it. Identify what it is exactly about it that's causing the fear. It's not just a generalized fear, a generalized sense of anxiety or panic. There's a trigger point. There's a certain very specific thing that you're very, very apprehensive about. And then look at that objectively and ask yourself, what about this in related areas of my life can I bring into the equation where I know that I'm good at? Like I really know I'm good at. And then buffer that. It's almost like a tennis match between the good and the bad. But if you play that match long enough, the good's going to win. You're going to start to feel more empowered. You're going to start to feel more confident. You're going to start to feel better about the situation overall. And that'll help you gain control over that fear and that anxiety. So this is just some advice, just something that I do. Maybe you can try it too. I used to know this guy. His name was Steve. And this was years ago, a couple decades ago maybe. And he used to always say, don't let fear hold you back. And at the time, that didn't really mean anything to me. It was just like this catchphrase that he used to throw out there. But as time has gone on, especially now in my life, I think that that's pretty sound advice. Don't let fear hold you back. You have control over it. The hardest part is being consciously aware, not only of the fear, but what's driving it. And if you can get to that point in your life, you can get a handle on it. You can take control of it. So don't let fear hold you back.